So Letitia, if you haven't done so already, invite you to share the slides, the PDF with everybody. So we've been spending a little bit of time with an introduction phase. We're going to complete the introduction now. Then we'll talk about needs versus strategies, and we'll employ needs with really simple empathic listening. And so we're basically going to leverage one concept for empathy, and then we'll have a bit of a closing circle. And then after we close, I'm just going to open up the group for question and answer. So it's a less structured way to just put your questions out there. So I love this picture because it shows the different processes of nonviolent communication, starting with self-empathy, which is connecting to whatever is true for myself. Like what's alive for me? Wow, maybe I'm a tinge nervous because this work is so meaningful and I want to be skillful at communicating. So that was my internal process of self-empathy. So empathy is a process of listening to the experience of another person. So honesty is sort of like the opposite. You get to fully express yourself in ways that build connection. And then strategy is maybe in a common agreement that we have on how to, what we're going to do after we've connected. So like, hey, we might choose to go have coffee. Or, hey, we might choose to show up to this Taste of Connection workshop. So strategies we'll see are related to specific actions. So today we're going to focus mostly on empathy. Mm-hmm. And before we go there, we're going to talk about needs consciousness. So the awareness and willingness to honor needs, the essential, universal, elemental qualities of life, like sustenance, love, and meaning. And I use a bunch of these skills from, Jim and Jory Mansky is where I got them from. And Jim has just recently published a book called, I think it's called Pathways to Liberation. But anyway, we're going to be leveraging a lot of these skills from the Pathways to Liberation in the series. So as a group, we're going to talk about strategies and needs. So this is it's a foundational concept in nonviolent communication, in which sometimes people confuse needs and strategies. So we're going to explore that concept a little bit as a group. And let's expand this a little bit so you can see it more. So what are some things that you might do for fun? And so I'd like to collect 3 to 4 strategies. So it's what you do. And then we'll talk about what needs are met. So go ahead and share something that you do for fun.
I go to a cultural event.
Okay, and a cultural event. And what, can you be a little bit more specific on what it is that you guys do there?
Well, it depends on what event it is, but I mostly watch, maybe paintings or stuff that, things that people have made.
Okay. All right, let's stick with that one. Looking at paintings at a cultural.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Excellent. All right, let's get another one. What's something else that you might do for fun?
There are a number of suggestions in the chat. There's hiking or going out to dinner or dancing.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then dancing. Thanks, Letitia. All right, that's a good list. let's work with that.
Okay.
So those are the strategies, the things that we do for fun. So looking at paintings. So why? So what's the motivation behind going to this cultural event where you look at paintings? Like what are the needs that are satisfied by that?
Pleasure.
It's a question. Go ahead and whoever spoke up, or if you have an
Yeah.
idea of why you might go to a cultural event. Looking at
Yeah.
paintings.
That was me. To be inspired.
All right. To be inspired by beauty, maybe?
Beauty, yeah, beauty. And a need for creativity. Is that also?
Yeah, creativity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you know, there's that cultural piece. Is this, when you say cultural, is this part of your own personal heritage?
No, it can be, getting to know other perspectives.
Okay,
And
so
going
other
back to the-
cultures. Yeah. Would you
Yeah.
say that helps to meet a need for community and maybe belonging or
Understanding, maybe.
understanding?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe learning as well, huh?
Yeah, learning. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next one. Hiking in nature. Why might you go hiking in nature?
Hiking makes me feel more grounded.
Yeah, so grounded. Maybe would you say that that's like meeting a need for self-connection and peace, something like that?
Absolutely. Reduces like anxiety or stress.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
self-connection, inner peace. Yeah, and what else? Someone else said something, but I didn't quite get it.
I was going to say the same thing, de-stress and exercise.
Yeah, so so de-stress is kind of a like a description, but you would de-stress in order to meet your need for like inner peace, right? Or like harmony. That is another way of describing that. And maybe there's something around health and well-being, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I specifically pointed out hiking in nature. So that might also meet needs for beauty, right?
Mhm.
So there might be something about beauty in there, maybe regeneration even. Yeah, and for some people, connection to other beings, other than human beings.
Mhm.
I think that maybe there's an element of maybe awareness when you're in nature,
Sure.
because it kind of takes you away from the digital distractions, and so that might be sort of a meaningful experience.
Yeah, so self-awareness, self-connection can be another way of describing that. Yeah. So it might even, yeah, help you to, yeah, connect with yourself. Everyone has their own words for that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it can also be healing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's just kind of a sampling. And notice, you know, everyone might have a little bit different reasons, but we can kind of relate to these. So what about going out to dinner? I'm assuming that, whoever listed that, are you alone or are you going with someone else? So why might you go out to dinner? Besides the obvious, right? Which is sustenance, right? So sustenance, you know, food.
I'm seeing pleasure and social connection in the chat.
Yeah, so connection, maybe companionship if you go with someone else.
Discovery, maybe trying new food.
Sure. Sure, yeah, like discovery or adventure or learning. Yeah, learning. It's kind of like tapped into that cultural piece, right? If you try something new, something different. There might be an ease component. Hey, I don't have to cook, right? So it's just so much easier to have someone else do it. So yeah, and I also enjoy going out and being around other people. So yeah, that's like a different, form of companionship, or it could be even community. So hoping that that's giving you kind of a sense of what's motivating your going out to dinner. Yeah. And if you're like me, you might go to a healthy, vegetarian or vegan place. So that's just my preference for eating. All right, let's go to the last one. So dancing, why might you go dancing? What's the energy behind that?
Moving your body and feeling connected to the music and just like the
Yeah, movement.
vibe of it.
And connected to the music, is there also like maybe a self connection, like connecting to your own body?
Yes, just feeling part of something bigger and outside of you, and
Yeah, so maybe even
doing
transcendence.
this with other people. Yes, transcendence. Yeah, and being in, being outside of yourself, but with other people.
Yeah, with other people, like community. Yeah. Dancing. Yeah, dancing is one of my practices. I love ecstatic dance. So definitely like self-connection as well. And I'd
So
say,
physical touches in the chat also. And
yeah, touch. Touch is a good one.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So I hope that gives you a sense for the differences between needs and strategies. And we'll look at some definitions in a little bit, but I wanted to give you kind of an experiential flavor of the difference between the two. So the strategies are the specific things that we do to meet our needs, like, going dancing. And understanding why we do those things is really important, because once we connect to the why, we want to go dancing, there might be other strategies that would allow us to still get those needs met. So let's say that I want to go dancing, and I asked Letitia, hey, Letitia, would you like to go dancing? And maybe she doesn't, dancing, the idea of going out doesn't sound fun to her. And we have these needs alive. So let's see. So, and we're connecting to the needs of like movement, embodiment, transcendence, community, and touch. So what are other strategies that we might, let's say that this transcendent piece is one of the bigger needs that I want satisfied. What might be other things that we could do? So let's say we have this need for transcendence, and Letitia maybe doesn't want to go dancing. It's like, go ahead, Letitia. Do you want to jump in?
Transcendence, maybe we try hiking.
Yeah.
Early in the morning, like before the sun rises.
Yeah.
Watch the sunrise.
Beautiful. Maybe. Yeah, to go on a little praise walk, a little sunrise hike. I love that idea. So what are some other things that so just to list the other options that we might have in meeting a need for transcendence, maybe going to a concert or listening to music, a special playlist. We might go to a museum. Did I already say that? What else? What else might we do to meet our needs for transcendence?
You could go to a yoga class maybe together.
Sure, you go to yoga, and there's a sense of togetherness too, right? So yoga might also be good. Yeah, so we identified 5 different strategies to meet those needs. And so if we're, in a friendship or a relationship of some sort, having a conversation around needs can be hugely liberating, right? Think about, how much easier it was to have this conversation than like arguing about strategies, because strategies is where conflict happens. So Letitia, I'd love to hear your version of what we're talking about, because I know I just love hearing you speak.
It's just so great when you set it up so beautifully. It's like, it occurs to me that when you're in a relationship, so often like a romantic partnership, let's say, so often you're fighting because, one person wants to go, like, why don't you go dancing? Why don't you ever take me dancing? Why don't you take me dancing? The other person's like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing about it, because you've never discussed the needs. And when you have that conversation where it's like, well, I'd like to be connected, I would like to have this spirit of transcendence. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a sense of awe. Then you can come to something that fits both of your needs, like hiking to see the sunset or going to the beach, and there's no more arguing, so that conflict, James says that conflict always happens, or Marshall says, conflict is always on the basis of strategies. And just learning that, it just frees up all your relationships because you don't have to fight about it anymore.
Yeah. Thank you, Letitia. I love how just we compliment each other. Thank you for speaking up. And so I'd like to share a little, getting into the definitional space a little bit, which I also find to be helpful. And so strategies, it's what we use or do to meet our needs. And it's anything related to people, locations, action, time, or objects. And I got this definition from Mickey Cashtan, trainer out of the Bay Area. And there's a nice little acronym that goes with it, PLATO, people, location, action, time, or objects. So anything related to a person, like, hey, Letitia, would you like to go dancing? So Letitia would be kind of seen as a strategy for meeting needs for transcendence or companionship. And the action is dancing. So that really highlights it as a strategy. And conflict happens at the strategy level. So, I might want to get dancing, and Letitia might want to go hiking. So those are 2 different strategies. So if that's the only level of our conversation, that's where conflict happens. She would rather go hiking, I want to go dancing. Mm-hmm. But if we connect to the needs level, we can still stay connected to each other and find other strategies to meet our needs. So needs are also seen as like intrinsic motivators, seeking fulfillment. So it's the why behind the action. And the cool thing is needs are universal. Everyone, or, most humans can relate to needs at some level or some time in life. So, our needs, even though they're present, they're not always present at the same time. Like this need for transcendence. Maybe I'll have it, for a little while, but then, the intensity behind it might decrease over time. But I could relate to it either way. And another way of talking about that, maybe I have a need for sustenance, right? Maybe I'm hungry, but even that passes, right? I'm not hungry all the time, or at least these days, I'm not hungry all the time. And so here's the mind-blowing concept that usually there's a little bit more conversation that happens. There's no conflict in needs. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to say it again so you can, try to wrap your head around this one. Needs are in perfect harmony with each other. There is no conflict in the spirit and energy of needs. So just pausing,
Yeah, that's amazing.
allowing that moment to play out. Needs are in perfect harmony with each other.
Mhm.
It's the strategies that create the conflict. So you could see that needs, another definition that I like a lot are life energy in us seeking fulfillment. So if you see them as energy, they're not in conflict. They're just being. They're just like radiating through our body, through our collective experience. And I know, Letitia, I've heard you share your definition of needs. I'd love to hear it if you want to speak.
Sure. I know, because no one's arguing. I'm like, wow, no one's, it's like, to me, the more I learn about needs, I describe it as it's the unique way that the energy comes through us. So like there are all these different needs, but no one has them in the same priorities list or in the same percentages, right? So I may have a greater need for transcendence and beauty, and someone else may have a greater need for something else, a different type of stimulation. And those unique compositions of expression are what make us us, right? And so it's the way that energy, the energy of the universe moves through us in needs. That's how we express as humans here. And just getting in connection with that is like, but it's not the strategy. Like French fries are not a strategy, or not a need, rather. I may think they're a need, but they are not the need, right?
Yeah.
So
French fries are just a strategy for comfort
strategy,
and a little bit of nutrition in there,
a little bit of nutrition, right?
a little sustenance, but they taste so good. Oh my God.
But they
Yeah.
can cause a lot of, conflict, the French fries.
Yeah, that's right. Because you're really into French fries and I prefer potato chips.
And there you go. And now we're getting divorced.
Wow, I didn't know we were married.
That's what I mean. I took it right there. I just took it all the way to the.
That was a quick relationship. Thanks, Letitia. I love that perspective that you give. And yeah, and just to highlight this, maybe because usually there's a lot more like people arguing and stuff. So I'm surprised there's no one arguing here. So let me, yeah. So the other thing is, needs, it's sort of like an energy level. The metaphor that I like using is like life is like an orchestra. Like you might have all of these instruments. There might be, I don't know, 100, let's say it's a large orchestra, 100 different instruments, but they're not all playing at the same time, right? The flute, every once in a while, the flute just kind of does its own thing and everyone else listens, so maybe, my need for transcendence is up and it's the only need that I'm aware of in that moment. But then there are times during the, the piece when other instruments play together, so maybe the strings, the violin, the viola, the oboe, and, maybe even some percussion come in. And so seeing life as an orchestra, and the feelings, which we aren't going to focus on today in this introductory workshop, but the feelings are basically the intensity behind our needs, right? So I might be super energized. So energized is like an expression of a feeling. and energized to have this transcendent experience. But I also, maybe there's a little violin playing that I also want some companionship. So acknowledging that companionship is also part of what's motivating my life right now. And that, just knowing that, allows me to make better choices about how to show up in the world. And not only better choices, but to have a conversation about our needs with someone else is the process of connecting. So getting to this place of mutual understanding is what connection is all about. So Letitia and I, even though she has a preference for going hiking and I might want to go dancing, just by having this connection around our needs can be super connecting. Even if we choose to, I don't know, do something completely different, just having that consciousness and willingness to hear each other is the journey, the dance of connection. So we might be dancing, with this NVC style, and it almost doesn't matter what we end up doing, because we're jiving with that symphony of mutual understanding. So we're making music together, and there's harmony. And I acknowledge her orchestra, she acknowledges my orchestra, and metaphorically we make music together. Yeah, Letitia, would you wanna add?
I
to
was
that?
just saying, like, that's really it. And I think for me, like, learning over and over and over, the point of nonviolent communication is the connection. It's not making somebody else do what you want them to do, or getting them to understand that hiking is really important. It's the connection. And so having that framework and technique for finding a space where I can appreciate James' desire to dance, but his need for transcendence, now I'm able to get into that space with him and appreciate that that's how that energy is coming through him. That's the connection right there.
Yeah, thank you. And I see a hand up. George, please unmute yourself. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Question. So I appreciate the distinction between needs and strategies. I'm curious about how based on the NVC model, wants and desires are defined and how they're valued. I feel like they're closer related to strategies than they are to needs, but still I'm wanting, I have a desire for wants to be clarified, for desires to be clarified.
Yeah, thanks for asking, George. And sometimes we use different words to describe strategies. Like I would put wants over here on the strategy column. Another word for strategies is preferences. Preferences, wants. They could even be desires. And the reason we're being really specific with our definitions here is the language itself can mean different things to different people. So a desire, if it has the needs like intrinsic, if the word desire maps to your intrinsic motivation seeking fulfillment, like the why behind the action, then you could use desire instead of needs. But desire, in my experience, desire is often confused or identified more closely with a preference or a strategy. Mm-hmm. Was that helpful, George?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just reflecting on conversations, like let's say in a marriage, right? It's like, what do you want? Well, what do you mean what I want? Well, what do you want? And really the question is what we're actually probably more value in asking, what do you need, than what do you want?
Yeah, I think And sometimes, you know, when we're like charged up, sometimes we need each other's help. So if I'm stimulated or, you know, triggered or something, I might need help to get back to life, to get back to my heart energy. And that's what we're going to cover next. So empathy is actually connecting with that life energy. So thank you so much for asking that. And that's exactly where we're going. So I'm going to pause just for maybe questions and comments, just give you an opportunity to explore the need space before we go into empathy, which is what George is getting at here. It's sort of like, okay, we have this knowledge and now how do we use it, right? Letitia, do you want to add anything to what George was saying?
No, I think that's where we're headed next. And that's the whole point about the empathy thing, which we're going to get to, but I'm curious to see if anybody has any questions, because usually this is a space where there's a lot of questions between what's the difference between strategies and needs. And it took me a while to get to it.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing something like that. Go ahead.
Can I just say something? It's kind of elaborating on George's point about like wants and desires, because I feel like they fall more in strategies to me than they fall into needs, because usually when we desire something, we're like, okay, I want I desire to be promoted in the next rounds of promotion, right? But it's always like a goal that we're going after, but not necessarily a need that we're trying to identify that we need to fulfill. Like the desire to be promoted comes from a need to be recognized and perceived as equals to my colleagues and all this other stuff, but it's not a need. It's more of a strategy in a way. So I feel like wants and needs are like very similar in terms of like a desire is like a more intensified want, but it's a strategy more so than it's a need. So that's how I understood it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like everything you said, Fabiana. Thanks for pitching in. I've seen another hand over there. Bethany, do you have a question?
It's more, well, I guess it's a comment and a question. I'm going back to when you were talking about if you want to go dancing, Letitia wants to go hiking, and you identify that the need for the dancing is transcendence, and you can get that hiking with Letitia. What if you just want to go dancing and you just want to hear the music and it isn't transcendence? It's just you need to feel the music go through your body and you need to move your body. Is the suggestion that you let go of that and agree to transcendence in some other form? Or is there a place where you can both identify and call it transcendence, but Letitia can say, I can see that you need that. I can't provide that with you, but I empathize with it and I'll see you later. And maybe we can go hiking.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Bethany.
Okay.
I love how you said that, because, you know, maybe there's something about dancing that's really alive for me. And actually, this has come up in my relationships. It's like, you know, I have ecstatic dance once a week, Sunday morning in the park. And my partner often will want to sleep in. So Letitia may not want to go, and that's cool. I honor Letitia's desire to, you know, like stay and do whatever, right? But I might choose to go anyway. So it's not like Letitia has to do anything just because she happens to be my friend or partner, right? So so having that conversation allows, it's sort of like in that dialogue, we honored each other's life energy. It's sort of like we honored each other's needs and we're letting go of the strategy. So like, so it's not, I'm not placing a demand on my friend or partner, like, oh, you have to go because I want to go dancing. So it's sort of like there's more freedom and liberation in this relationship, because she, you know, she's cool if I go dancing by myself, or I might I might invite someone else to go with me. Yeah, was that helpful? Letitia, you want to add anything to that?
I just like, it's kind of playing into another question that I'm seeing in the chat. And so, yes, and it gets into this. So there are traits that we tend to usually discuss as being more fixed, like when it comes to a couple, and one person has a strong need for physical touch and the other may feel differently about it. So it's like that, how can you elaborate that on a little bit and how that middle ground can be found? So like,
Yeah. Thank you. So in some partnerships, you have agreements around, touch or other things, or maybe time together. And so touch is kind of a foundational, need that, since we're babies, babies that aren't touched and held, they don't do well. So other strategies, other than, having maybe Letitia, I might, ask Letitia, hey, Letitia, would you be up for giving me a 15-minute massage? And maybe she's not up for it. Maybe her hands are tired. Maybe she's tired. And if she's not willing, I might call, someone else to give me a massage. Another strategy for touch is having a pet. So having pets are awesome, ways for companionship and touch. And even like soaking in a hot tub is another strategy that like works for me. Anyway, I hope that helps. So
kind of like moving past, I mean, I'm just, thank you. I just wanted to say in the chat, when we talk about any sort of need like that, even if it's sexual, because I think we tend to think that the needs are weighted and that some are more important than others. But James, you're saying that's not necessarily true. It's not like.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some chat dialogue where they're asking.
I just want to honor the question and make the point, because I think it's really important.
Yeah. So we're starting with our training wheels. So this is the introductory workshop. And so I'm giving you the basic concepts. So when it talks, conversations around sex and relationships, it gets a little bit more complicated. So I'm gonna postpone that one to, if you register for the series, maybe we get into that if there's a lot of juice around it. But I just want to acknowledge it's a great question. It's an important one. And we sort of need to learn how to dance together before we get into the tougher conversations, which also have a lot of cultural influence. So our culture feeds, there's a lot of energy that comes from our culture into how we define our relationships as well. So I see Nadia, your hand's up. Let's go with one question and then we'll move on to dive into empathy. Nadia, do you have a question?
I do, thank you. So feel free to tell me if this is outside the scope of this workshop, but something I find I struggle with, as well as people I'm in communication with, is identifying what the need is. And some of this is helped by understanding like what are some of the culturally accepted needs. I've downloaded the needs inventory from the NVC website and it's helpful. I like that it acknowledges it's not exhaustive. But with certain needs, it's like my intellect doesn't need a ton of convincing to bite. Like I have a need for food because I feel hungry. I have a need for touch because of all of this research about how humans respond to touch. With other needs like transcendence, I hear that and I recognize like, oh yeah, I feel like I have felt that need, but I also recognize there are probably plenty of people I know who would say like, I don't have a need for transcendence. Maybe their need for transcendence is just smaller. But if there isn't some like exhaustive universal list of human needs, when I like sense the inkling of a need, is it just a need because I say it is? Or like, what are some ways to navigate like validating what is a need and what is not?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nadia. So yeah, that's a deeper question. I'm going to touch a little bit on it and then we'll move on. Sometimes the words themselves get in the way. You know, when I think about transcendence, so some people may not relate to that word. In fact, you know, when I first started this practice, that word sounded really woo-woo and you know, new age-ish or whatever, and I couldn't relate to it that well. And what I try to encourage in people is, and again, as we become more comfortable with our nonviolent communication practice, instead of saying transcendence, I might provide a little bit more context and stretch that out into maybe a phrase or something. And I might say, yeah, you know, I have this longing to be around other people and to feel inspired by the collective energy of people showing up together, you know. So I might say something like that instead of saying I have a need for transcendence, you know. And your experience of that life energy may be different. So the beauty of this practice, you know, and I see this as a discipline of love and conversation is sort of how I see, you know, nonviolent communication is if we're in that consciousness, we can have a conversation about, you know, what is it that's behind that need that I happen to label it transcendence, but it, you know, it goes beyond the word. So was that helpful? And Letitia, I see your hand. Go ahead,
I'm
Letitia.
like dying to speak in this one thing. I'm so glad, Nadia, that you said that, because for me, identifying needs was my big struggle in this, because in the culture that I'm living in, no one ever taught me how to understand what my needs were. And the process of seeing my needs and appreciating them and naming them is the process of getting to know myself. That's what I want to offer to you, because it might not be obvious and needs change over time. So just learning to see them and appreciate them, I have found to be part of the process.
Yeah, thank you, Letitia. And there's a cultural piece, I want to call it out. In the culture that I grew up in, I wasn't encouraged to have needs. In fact, the message that I got growing up was to be selfless and needless was a virtue. So maybe you grew up with the same messaging. So and Letitia, I know that we've talked about this before. Women in particular, we're told to be selfless. You want to speak to that a little bit? I mean, we could probably spend the next hour.
I could go on and on, but I feel like that was part of it for me, because, you know, as women, we're like, oh, I'm allowed to have needs besides serving everybody. You know, so just the concept that I was allowed to focus on my own needs, that was like a whole new starting point for me. Yeah. So even now I'll be out in the street going, oh, I didn't know I needed this. Who knew? Now I can name it, you know? So it's just a process. But
yeah, it's a journey of self-discovery on a lot of levels.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And that's the invitation. Please join us in the 10-week series and we get to go deeper together. Cecilia, I see your hands up, and, you know, I'd really love to dive into the empathy practice. But if it's totally burning, I want to hear it. Or another option is we could save it to the last part of the workshop where there's Q&A. Are you cool if we you okay if we stop and we continue and take your question later? Okay, your video moved, so I'm assuming that it's okay.
Oh, it's fine. I took my hand down.
Okay, thanks, Cecilia. All right, so let's move to the next section.